Alrighty, what is going on, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be covering the Division One recruiting timeline. And so this is one of the things that I haven't talked a lot about for a little while. And I want to really go through this in detail because this is probably the most important thing that you need to understand when it comes to Division One recruiting. And pretty much nobody talks about it. So I just want to walk you guys through this today, and I'm going to be using Junior Golf Scoreboard as my reference here. It's really important to understand that everything that I talk about, it's not something that was like, oh, well, I learned this in PGA school. I didn't go to PGA school. Everything that I talk about, I have had to learn out of necessity. And so that has been, for my own failings as a junior golfer, from working with junior golfers and other coaches, and then going out on my own and kind of applying these principles that I've found have the biggest impact on what a player ends up doing, right? And how successful they end up being. And so I'm going to be using some different examples of students that I've worked with, players that I have not worked with, just to be able to articulate this stuff. But I can't stress this enough. Again, this is not theoretical stuff that I learned in school or something like this. This is actual stuff that I've had to learn out of necessity in order to be able to get players results. Because when I work with students, it's not inexpensive. And so I feel an ethical obligation to be able to at least do my best to get them in position to have that success, right? And so just super, super important to understand this. As well, everything I'm going to discuss here, more or less public information. There's some stuff that I'm going to show you guys that is not necessarily public information, but I'm discussing it with you guys. And so you guys will be able to see here, you guys are looking at the same data that I am. And so when I'm doing this stuff, I'm just reverse engineering. I'm just putting pieces together. And then I've found that these pieces do, work out very, very well in the real world. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. And always, if you guys enjoy the video, leave it a like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. All right, cool. So you guys are going to see me reference this page a lot. This is, if we go to rankings and honors, college signings, class of 2025 signees, we can see this all the way up to 2016 or 2026. I'm looking at 2025 because it's more complete. And then go all the way back to 2018. So this is true for both boys and girls. I know I talk a lot about boys. All the same principles apply for girls. It's just a little bit less competitive. And so there's just kind of that element here. So anyway, these are all the players that got recruited to Division One programs. And so one of the questions that might float through your head is, hey, Connor, how come you only talk about Division One? What about Division Two and Division Three? There's two main reasons why I don't talk about Division Two and Division Three very much. Number one, and this is probably the most important one, is Division One recruiting. If you're the caliber player to get recruited to play Division One golf, is easier. It's more centered around the player's ability to score and the player's ability to play golf at a high level, which is what I'm really good at. I'm really good at getting players a lot better in a short period of time. That mostly comes down to using data to reverse engineer these things so that we take higher impact decisions for what we're doing rather than just winging it with like brute force or something like that, which is what most players end up doing. So it's just a lot easier. Like literally when you get into these positions where you've got the scoring differential where it needs to be, coaches reach out to you. It's sick. It's super awesome. As I've been able to work with better and better players, it gets even cooler because you get better and better programs reaching out. And so when I say better programs, I mean the best programs in the country. Like I've had students where you've got Clemson reaching out to them. You've got Auburn reaching out to them. You've got Stanford reaching out to them. It's sick. And so that is the position that you want to be in. That is position A, right? Now, there are considerations for D2, D3. If you're like an academic person, sure, by all means. I just had a student commit to Columbia, right? In his case, he cared about academics, still goes to a Division One program, but you guys get the idea here. The other issue with D2 and D3 is they have smaller recruiting budgets. And so you have to do more legwork. So it incurs an extra expense for you as a parent going through this process, right? If your child's like okay at golf, not only do you have to pay to have them improve at golf, which is what I do, but you also have to pay for the connections and you have to pay typically for some type of recruiting agency to be able to put those pieces together. Maybe you can get lucky in your home state. And to be fair, you could say, hey, we're just a little bit shy of Division One and still get D2 and D3 offers just organically. It's just not as reliable as it is for Division One. We don't have as much transparency. We don't have as much clarity on that. Okay. So when I'm talking to players, I'm always reverse engineering. Okay, hey, where do we want to go? What are the programs we want to go to? Where do we need to be ranked in our class? And so this is super important that you guys understand this. Where we're ranked in our class is not something you need to worry about at these early stages. This is a byproduct. You do not want to look at this as the primary thing. So if you've got a sixth grader who's ranked 80th in their class, it's not as good as it looks. Okay, because there's just fewer players in that class that are ranked. We want to be looking at the scoring differential. Okay, we want to get to this number, and so that's what we want to do our math based off of. To say like, hey, we need to get there. We're here today. We got a scoring differential of, I don't know, 5. We want to get to -5 to play at the program. So we've got 10 shots. How many years do we have to accomplish that? Say we're at 8th grade. We've got 3 years. We're going into 8th grade. So we have 8th, 9th, 10th grade, right? End of 10th grade, June 15th, the sophomore year, coaches are going to be reaching out and starting the recruiting process. You want to be in position by that date. You do not want to be scrambling at that point. Okay. Super important that you guys understand. We want to be where we want to be by that date. We do not want to be scrambling. Okay. So that means we need to have that timeline. Okay. So we're going into 8th grade. We got to improve by 10 shots. We got to do that over a 3-year period of time. That means that we need to improve by 3.3 shots per year in order to accomplish that. Okay. Really, really, important. Once we've got that, then we can get into the nitty-gritty details about how we actually accomplish that. Which again, if you don't have that like laid out for you, good luck. You're pretty much just brute forcing it, hoping that happens. Which, in my experience, is not a very effective strategy. I've worked with some of the best coaches in the world. It's tough. It's you can't just say, hey, golf swing better, therefore 3 shots. Because by that same token, it's like, why not 4? Why not 5? Like, why not 6? Like, what's the limit there, right? And so we end up in this psychology. Maybe you've thought this to yourself. Well, one day it's going to click, right? And that's just not what happens. That's not what I've ever seen happen. That's what I'm going to demonstrate to you guys doesn't happen. And so I just want to be super clear about that. And obviously, this is what I'm doing with students. If this is something that you're interested in, you want to hear more about, how I approach this and what I do, and potentially having your child work with me. I don't work with every student, but if you're interested in that, fill out the application below. We'll look at your situation, see if it's a good fit for them, and then if it is, we'll kind of go through what that would look like. But anyway, back to the video here. There's also a link below if you want help with tournament selection as well, because everything I'm going to be looking at is, as you guys can see, ranked players. And so if you're wondering, how do I actually get ranked? There's a resource down there as well for you guys if you want to check that out. So anyway, looking at Miles Russell. Miles Russell is the best player in the country, so let's use him as just kind of our first example here. Okay. So he's got a scoring differential of -10.21. Okay. So we just want to see that in a vacuum. No, that does not mean that he shoots 10 under. So he's got a scoring average of about 69, a little bit, 69.3. Look at the length of golf courses that he's playing. It's about 7,200 yards. These are very challenging golf courses on average, as you guys can see. I'm not going to go into the weeds of how to get into these particular events. These are not events you can just sign up for, right? We have to work through that tournament progression. And again, there's the link below if you guys want more direct help with that, just specifically. Okay. So let's go from this day, May 2026, to a year ago. How much has Miles improved by? Well, he's improved by a little less than a shot. So he was at -9.37. Now he's at -10.2. So has he made progress? Yeah. Like, has he stayed the best player in his class? Yeah. Obviously, phenomenal player here. Has his percentile improved? Also, yes. Right. But we've got a little bit less than a shot of absolute improvement. And again, for him, you're the best player in the world. It's hard to move the needle too much there. So let's go year prior, right? So we go May 2025 back to May 2024, -8.46 to -9.37. So once again, a little bit less, or actually in this case, it was a little bit more than a shot. Okay. So we got about a shot of improvement here. Now let's go back to May 2023, -3.2. So he goes from -3.2 all the way to -8.46. So in this case, this is where he had his jump, right? He improved by about 5 shots in that particular year. And that pretty much set him up going forward here. That was the majority of that improvement that he had. Let's look even before that. This was so cool about being able to do this here. Okay, so we've got negative 3.21. I know this is technical, guys, but I hope you enjoy it. If you do enjoy it, go ahead and leave this a like. All right, so we got the year prior here. So we got a scoring differential. We don't have exactly May. Also looks like, okay, cool. So we got 22. So we were at negative 0.78 and we get to negative 3. Okay. So in this case, we improved by about 2.3 shots, right? So again, hopefully you guys are seeing a pattern here. It's difficult to improve by lots of shots all at once, even if you're one of the best players in the country and one of the most talented players. Okay, so again, let's continue moving backwards. We've got about 3. In this case, he improves by, maybe you could call it 4 shots. And so, again, 4 shots on the higher end, 5 shots, to be generous to him. But in a lot of these years, it's 1 shot or even less than a shot. Okay, so that's Miles. You guys can say maybe that's extreme. Let's just go ahead and pick out another player. It's a little bit more middle ground here. He's ranked 100th in his class. It's more normal. He's going to go to the University of Kentucky here. We can look at his scoring average. A little bit worse, 72.4. I'd say this is in the normal range. If your child's like, hey, I want to play Division I golf, 72 to 74, that's the number. Like, that's the range for scores that they need to be in. And we need to be playing about 7,000 yards. That's my recommendation. Okay. When we do a little bit shorter golf courses, yes. If we do shorter golf courses, we score a little bit better. If we do longer, harder golf courses, we can score a little bit worse. In my experience, it's easier to shoot 74 on average on longer golf courses comparatively to 72 or 71 on shorter golf courses, because we have to make a lot more birdies shooting those lower numbers. And even if we play shorter golf courses, birdies are still hard to come by. You also have to consider if you play the shorter golf courses, usually they're not in as good a condition because usually the tournaments aren't quite as big of a deal. And so if a lot of birdies get made because our putting is good, you have variability on the greens. You guys can kind of see how that goes, right? Now let's look at this player. So May, again, negative 4.14. Let's go back a year here, negative 4.39. So in this case, this is one of the best players in the country. Right, he's going to Kentucky. He's actually gotten about 0.2 shots worse. This is not to knock him or anything. This is just like for illustrative purposes here. Now let's look at the year prior. Okay, so we got negative 2.5, and he gets to negative 4.39. So in this case, it's a little bit less than 2 shots of improvement. Okay, now let's go again back a year here. So 0.89 all the way to negative 2.5. So in this case, we've got a little over 3 shots of improvement in that particular year. Okay. Continuing back here. Once again, I know I'm going into the weeds here, but I want to make sure that you guys have a thorough understanding. So boom. All right, cool. So here's the year that he really makes a jump, right? So he improves from 4.72 all the way up to 0.89. So that means he's improved by a little under 4 shots, but pretty close to about 4 shots. Okay. And then we go prior to that. I think we're going to lose the data here. So we're in May. It looks like, that's April here. All right, cool. So here's another year where we're close-ish to about 5-ish shots here. But as you guys can kind of see, we have that kind of slowing here. Now, I want to take another example of another student that I've worked with in the past. He's going to UCLA. Scoring average of 71. As you guys can see, longer, close to about 7,000 yards. Scoring differential of negative 5.6. Let's look at him. So, and full disclosure, I have not worked with this player since he got recruited, which I want to say, where did he end up getting recruited here? It would have been somewhere in this range here when he was at like negative 3 or negative 4. So anyway, we're at negative 5.63. If we go back a year, we're at negative 4.53. Okay, so about a shot of improvement. Let's go back a year again. We are at negative 2.58. We get to negative 4.58, right? So 2 shots of improvement. Okay, let's go a year prior to that. Okay, negative 0.43 to negative 2.58. All right, cool. So he improves by 2 shots again in that case. And then prior to that, we improved by about 3.5 shots. Okay. So as you guys can hopefully see, I know I'm beating this to death. We don't improve by 10 shots in a year. Nobody does that. That's not a real thing. And so it's on the high end for these players. You're seeing 4 or 5 shots. Okay. Continuing on. Here's one of the students that I actively work with right now. And so when we started working together, he was ranked 66 in his class. He had a scoring differential of 3.59. Now he's down to negative 1.24. So in that case, since July, he's improved by 4.6 shots. I got a couple more months here, but he's on pace to improve by about 6 shots. And so why does that work? Why does that happen? That's because we're very deliberate about what he's doing in his game. Okay. And so it's just super, super important here that we really understand that. Obviously, he's been able to get to 10th in his class. It's because we've been very deliberate. When we started working together, he had a scoring average of about 75. And so we've been able to bring a big chunk of this off just from the scores. And we've been able to lengthen out the golf courses. You guys can kind of see here, we started off on some of these shorter golf courses. And then progressively, we've lengthened these out. And as a result, the scoring differential has followed. Okay. One more here. Another student I worked with this past year, interesting scenario here. So we started working together we started working together in July here. So he had a scoring differential of 7.48. And so we were actually able to get him all the way down to 0.46 at the end of that first year of working together. Now, for them, in their case, they said, hey, we're good. We've already made a ton of progress. We're happy with this. We're good. We don't think we need to continue to do this. And to some degree, like that kind of played out for them. But you can also look here. We're kind of just reaping the rewards of what had happened prior here. So we get a little bit less strategic about the tournaments that we're picking. We start to see some scores slide. Obviously, we got this nice 69, which is awesome. I'm super happy about. We got the scoring differential of negative 1.9. But once again, that's just kind of like one of the things that I've noticed, when applying this process is it actually does have a pretty big impact, especially with players. Like, even if you look at that and be like, oh, well, you're just looking at the stats and like telling us what to do. And like, maybe we can figure that out on our own. I think I've got a pretty good understanding of my game. And, realistically, improving at golf is much more nuanced than most people really recognize, because a lot of the time, especially as we get better and better, there's more and more things that we can do to screw up our game, and there's fewer and fewer good things that we can't do. So we need to have data to protect us from making dumb decisions. We also need frameworks to help us understand how we're going to make those decisions and how to interpret that data. And so when I'm working with students, that's the primary thing that I'm doing for you guys. I'm thinking for you. We're looking at your child's tracking their stats. We're making sure that they're playing in the right tournaments, right? And so I'm looking at their statistics and saying, hey, here's what you need to do based off of this. Here's what you need to do in your practice. Here's what's trending. Here's what's kind of moved against us. Hey, what's going on with this, right? I'm able to kind of quarterback that whole situation. So we're able to see that consistent progress. And so the cool thing for me is, as I collect more and more data from more and more students, I get more and more clear about what works for particular problems and how to solve those things. And so as I work with more and more students through time, I get more and more certain about how this stuff is going to play out, which is why I can say, hey, here's how this stuff gets modeled out. Like a player like, Jason, in his case, he's going to have whatever options he wants, right? Because they made the decision to make that investment at an earlier age, right? So depending on how risk averse different people are, the reality is, like, you better be in position. Hopefully you can see that from like these better players we're looking at. Better to be in position early rather than try to scramble late, right? That's super, super important. And so just by the nature of like when recruiting happens, right, we want to be in that position earlier. And so if you're watching this video and you're like, hey, I've got an 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old, it's like, that's really the time to put them in position. That opens all the doors, right? We don't want to get too caught up in, recruiting technically happens in sophomore year, right? It's like, that's technically true, but that's not when the work gets put in. If you've succeeded at a high level in anything, you know that you don't reap the rewards when you start doing the stuff. It's like if you're a doctor, a lawyer, a business owner, whatever, like, you understand that the work that you put in does not reward you until way down the road. And so the key to insulate yourself from that is actually doing the math on, okay, am I on track for this? We need to model this out with math so we can predict the future. And so that's what I'm doing with students. If that's something you guys are interested in, you can fill out the application below. We can look at your child's situation and see if this would make sense for them and if this would be a good fit. If it's not, I'll point you guys in the right direction. I'll say, hey, here's what we need to do instead in order to be in a position where you could do something like this. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and leave it a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. And go check out some of the other videos on the channel where I go into all these different subjects, whether it's player development, tournament selection, you name it. I'm sure we've got a video here. And if there's something that I haven't covered that you want me to cover, go ahead and comment below. Let me know. And if it makes sense, I'll cover that as well. All right, guys. See you in the next one.